Life has changed a lot in the last 100 years. The world is smaller, communication faster, information more accessible than ever. And these big differences are all possible because of a very small one: the difference between 1 and 0. That's the basis of binary code, the language used to control the digital technologies that have made this transformation possible. But while binary is at the heart of modern technology, you might be surprised to hear that it's also at work somewhere far more primitive: the human mind. And here, rather than propelling us into the future, it might actually be holding us back, which is why many people are increasingly concerned about what psychologists call binary bias. We usually hear about biases in the context of discrimination, for instance, showing an unfair preference for one person over another. But binary bias is different, because it's what's known as a cognitive bias, a preference for a certain way of thinking. Put simply, our brains like to make things easy, so whenever possible, they'll frame a decision in terms of just two options: yes or no, for or against, all or nothing. This is probably because of how many binary decisions we've faced throughout our evolution. Is this plant safe to eat or poisonous? Should we sleep in this cave or look elsewhere? It's a smart enough approach when the only goal is survival. But nowadays, when our problems are a bit more complicated, our brain's insistence on thinking this way is starting to cause problems. You probably know what I mean already. A quick glance online reveals polarized shouting matches on pretty much every topic imaginable. But it's not just social media. Scarcely any news story gets covered without hearing from both sides of the issue. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You need at least two sides to debate something, and hearing opposing views can make it easier to get your head around a topic. But this ease comes at a cost, because anything actually worth debating is never that simple. And when we try to crowbar messy, convoluted topics into neat, contrasting viewpoints, things can start to get ugly. Take the American question of gun control. This is often presented as an all-or-nothing face-off between gun-loving cowboys and gun-hating snowflakes. But while US citizens are evenly split over whether gun ownership increases or decreases general safety, reducing the whole issue to pro and anti distracts from the fact that most Americans are on the same page, believing gun violence is a serious problem, and supporting some gun control measures, if not an all-out ban. And yet, the simplistic binary way this issue is presented has contributed to years of political deadlock. This is an especially potent example because it also demonstrates perhaps the most powerful and dangerous binary of all: us versus them. You see, whenever we oversimplify a complex problem into opposing extremes, we also tend to categorize and caricature people along the same lines. In this case, the stereotypes of rootin' tootin' conservatives or bleeding heart liberals, making it far easier to dismiss them and their views. And once we've divided the world into allies and enemies, even trying to reach out to the other side looks like treachery. As a result, an us against them mentality causes people to double down on their own opinions, making it harder to understand, let alone change, the minds of those who disagree. So what can we do about a tendency as deep-seated as binary bias? Well, the first step is simply knowing it exists. Because if we can recognize this behavior in ourselves and in the world around us, we can make a conscious effort to resist it, which starts with remembering that any issue we see framed in binary terms probably doesn't represent the whole story. We shouldn't underestimate how difficult breaking this habit will be, though, because it means both rejecting simplicity in favor of complexity and also stepping outside our comforting tribal allegiances to think for ourselves. Two things that evolution has taught us to avoid. But if that effort allows us to take responsibility for our role in polarization, instead of waiting for someone else to solve the problem, it will be worth making. It's clear that binary bias represents a pretty major flaw in our cognitive machinery, but not necessarily a fatal one. After all, digital technology is built on a binary foundation. That doesn't mean it can only respond to questions with yes or no. Instead, by putting together enough yeses and nos, it's given us access to more knowledge, more possibilities than previous generations could dream of. In a similar way, we needn't be limited by our evolutionary programming. We just need to get better at seeing the world in more than black and white. to develop a 360-degree full-spectrum view of reality, encompassing a broad range of positions from which we can argue, negotiate, and hopefully find some common ground.